Deborah woke up in the morning with a warm smile on her face. As usual, she carefully got up so as not to wake her husband, Michael, sleeping next to her. Michael was a successful engineer at an IT company. He made good money, and their family enjoyed all the benefits they could afford. Deborah and Michael were happily married and had a wonderful son named Derek, who had just turned 2. It was a quiet morning, and Deborah began to prepare breakfast, knowing that Derek and Michael would be spending more time together today since Michael had taken the day off. They planned to go to the park, and Deborah was looking forward to the day so that she could spend time with her family. When Michael woke up and joined her in the kitchen, he was as cheerful and caring as ever. They laughed and talked over breakfast, and then headed to the park. Derek was laughing and running around the meadow, and Michael and Deborah enjoyed watching their happy son. However, Deborah's happiness was marred by a strange accidental discovery that occurred later that day. Upon returning home, she was helping Michael with unloading the car and accidentally discovered an unfamiliar package in the trunk that made her smile disappear. The package contained intimate toys and female role-play costumes. This find made her worry and suspect that Michael was hiding something from her. All of these items were completely out of keeping with his normal life and character. Deborah decided to find out from her husband whose things were these, and what were they doing in his car. In the evening, as her son fell asleep, Deborah couldn't help herself and asked Michael, "Michael, what is this package I found in the trunk of the car?" Placing the package on his desk, Michael took a deep breath and tried to find the right words. "Deborah, it's a gift for you. I wanted to pleasantly surprise you and diversify our relationship." Deborah looked at him in disbelief. "A gift for me? Are you really sure it's not for someone else?" Michael nodded his head. "Of course, honey, it's for you. I wanted to add spice to our lives, but this seems like an unfortunate way to do it." Deborah couldn't immediately tell whether to believe Michael or not. She found it hard to believe that all of this was just a gift for her. Deborah asked, "Can you explain why it was in the trunk of the car and not in the house?" Michael smiled. "I was embarrassed, Deborah. I didn't want you to find it accidentally in the house. Just a planning error." Deborah was still impressed, but she decided to give him a chance to make things right. She realized that sometimes people did strange things in hopes of surprising their loved ones. Deborah decided to wait and see how Michael would act in the future. All night, Deborah couldn't take away her anxiety. Deep down, she sensed a deception, and she decided that it was necessary to solve the mystery. Over the next few days, Deborah began to follow Michael closely, recording his actions and movements. She began to notice that he began to stay late at work more and more often. This was increasing Deborah's suspicion. Deborah picked up her cell phone and began searching for a private investigator in her town. She found one who seemed reliable and called him, telling him of her suspicions and the need to investigate. The detective agreed to take on the case and began secret surveillance of Michael. He recorded all of his movements, gathering information and evidence. Soon the detective discovered something unexpected. Michael was regularly meeting with a woman who seemed older than him. They would retire to a downtown hotel and spend hours at a time. For Deborah, this news came as a shock. Her doubts were confirmed, and she was confronted with the horrible truth. Her husband was cheating on her, and now she had conclusive evidence of that cheating in her hands. The question of what to do next became more acute, and she realized that she would have to make some tough decisions. Deborah got the address and room key from the undercover agent. She couldn't wait to find out what was going on and was determined to solve the mystery that had plagued her for too long. She parked the car not far from the hotel, and with trepidation in her heart, she headed for the room door. She turned the key in the lock and carefully opened the door. A scene unfolded before her that she could never have imagined. Michael, her husband, was naked and bound on the bed. In his mouth was a gag. A woman, whom Deborah recognized as Michael's boss at work, jumped out of the bathtub. She was dressed in a provocative nurse's outfit. Deborah couldn't move at first, as if frozen in terror. Her world had collapsed, and the reality of this scene was unbearable. All she could do was let out a muffled shriek. Michael and the supervisor were shocked at her sudden appearance. They tried to explain or justify the situation, but the words sounded empty and meaningless. Deborah felt a mixture of anger, shame, and grief. She could no longer ignore this horrible discovery. The tension in the room was unbearable, and she knew she had to do something about it. Finally, she resolutely turned and left the room. Her own peace of mind and the future of her family were more important than trying to explain or change what had happened. Shortly thereafter, Deborah filed for divorce, putting Michael and his boss in the past. It was one of the most difficult yet courageous decisions of her life, and she was preparing to begin a new chapter in her life. In order to deal with her emotions and make the right decision, Deborah began seeing a therapist. Therapy helped her express her feelings, sort out her needs, and determine exactly what she wanted in her new life. She also went to an attorney to begin divorce proceedings and address important issues of joint property, alimony, and Derek's parenting. With each passing day, Deborah began to comprehend healing. She found support from close friends and family who stood by her during this difficult time. Derek was her rock, and she devoted a lot of time and attention to her son to provide him with a sense of stability and security. She also decided to turn her attention to her own career and personal well-being. Deborah returned to the job she had abandoned due to family obligations and began to build her professional path again. She found that the job gave her not only financial independence, but also the self-affirmation she so badly needed. Michael continued to try to bring Deborah and Derek back into his life. Despite all her rejections and doubts, he didn't stop. He apologized many times and tried to convince Deborah that he had changed and was willing to do anything to make up for his mistakes. Deborah's heart was torn between wanting her family back and the fear that Michael might return to his old habits. She questioned whether a normal life could be restored after such a betrayal. One night, after getting drunk at a bar, Michael decided to make another attempt to see Deborah and Derek. He got behind the wheel of his car and drove to their house, hoping he could talk Deborah into meeting. And at one point, he lost control of the car and didn't slow down in time. His car crashed into a tree with terrifying force. It was a terrible accident. An ambulance arrived at the scene. They tried to save Michael, but his injuries were too serious. He died on the spot. It was something Deborah never expected. Deborah learned of this tragedy from the police. It was an unexpected blow that shook her to the core. All feelings overwhelmed her, from accusation and anger to grief and regret. After Michael's tragic death, Deborah was left in deep grief and pain. She couldn't believe that he no longer existed, and the feeling of loss encompassed her every day. She tried to support Derek and be strong for him, but inside she was broken. A few days after the tragedy, Deborah went to the doctor to learn more about her medical condition. There it was announced to her that she was pregnant. It was shocking news, and Deborah couldn't believe her ears. She had already felt alone and defenseless after the loss of Michael, and now she was faced with this new reality. Another of Michael's children was growing inside her. This news came like a momentary flash of light in her dark world. Deborah faced a difficult choice: continue the pregnancy, or terminate it. The internal conflict was unbearable, and she didn't know which solution to apply. She felt that this baby was a part of Michael, whom she had just buried. At the same time, she feared that another child would be a burden to her and she would not be able to give him the same care and attention she had given Derek. Deborah felt completely alone and confused and had to make one of the hardest decisions of her life. The grief and stress were unbearable, and she had no way to share her feelings with Michael or find support from him. That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and rate the video with a like. Thank you.